Title card flickers. The sound of clinking glasses, muffled laughter, and footsteps across marble floors. Alara Selene moved like a shadow through the Veylor mansion's grand hall, a silver tray trembling in her hands. Her dress was plain, worn thin from years of scrubbing floors and serving meals, yet she carried herself with quiet dignity. That dignity was exactly what Adrian Veylor hated most. Seated at the head of the banquet table, Adrian, heir to the Veylor fortune, sharp-jawed and merciless, watched her with eyes as cold as polished steel. To the guests, he was a refined nobleman. To Selene, he was a cruel master who never let her forget that she was nothing more than the daughter of debtors, chained to his family until the last breath left her body. "Slower, maid." Adrian's voice cut across the laughter like a blade. "Or must I remind you again what happens when you spill?" A murmur spread among the guests, eyes shifting toward Selene. Heat rose to her cheeks, but she kept moving. Her hands tightened on the tray as Adrian's smirk deepened. He lived for these moments, where her spirit, though bruised, still flickered. When Selene reached him, Adrian leaned back in his chair, his voice loud enough for every ear in the hall. "Kneel." The room went silent. Selene froze, her heart hammering. The command was not one of service, but of humiliation. Slowly, with every muscle in her body screaming against it, she sank to her knees before him. Gasps rippled around the table. Adrian lifted his glass, swirling the wine as if nothing were amiss. "You see?" he said to his companions, his gaze never leaving Selene. "Even the proudest dog learns when beaten long enough." Her nails dug into her palms, blood prickling beneath her skin. For a moment, the shame burned hotter than any wound he had ever given her. But still, she lifted her chin. And that defiance, that spark in her eyes, ignited something dark in Adrian. His hand slammed against the table, rattling plates. He rose, the hall echoing with his boots as he strode to her. Without warning, he grabbed her arm, yanking her upright. The guests gasped, some turning away, others watching with a mixture of horror and fascination. "Look at her," Adrian hissed, dragging her toward the sweeping grand staircase at the hall's end. "Still daring to look me in the eye, still daring to think she's anything but mine to break." Selene stumbled, her breath catching. The stairs loomed, the guests whispered frantically, but no one dared intervene. At the top, Adrian released her arm, his face carved in fury. "Kneel before me again," he ordered. Selene's chest rose and fell, her voice trembled but carried, "No." The single word shattered the air. Silence followed. Adrian's jaw clenched, his pride cracking under the weight of her defiance. And then, with a violent shove, he pushed her. Selene's body tumbled down the marble steps, the world spinning in flashes of red cloak and pale skin. Gasps filled the hall, a scream caught in someone's throat. She struck the ground with a sickening thud. Stillness. The tray clattered beside her, silver against marble. Selene did not move. The camera lingers on Adrian's face. For the first time, his eyes flicker not with triumph, but with something colder and far more dangerous. The banquet hall was frozen in silence, the echo of Selene's fall still ringing against the marble. Servants huddled at the edges, their eyes wide with horror. None dared move, none dared breathe. The only sound was the faint clinking of Adrian's glass as he set it down, calm as though nothing had happened. Selene lay sprawled at the foot of the staircase, her body twisted unnaturally. The candlelight flickered over her face, drained of all color. A thin trickle of blood slid from her temple, trailing down her cheek. "She's not moving," a servant whispered, voice trembling. Another shushed him quickly, but the whispers spread like wildfire. He went too far this time. Not even she can survive that fall. Will Master Adrian kill us all if she dies? Adrian descended the stairs slowly, his expression unreadable, every step echoing like a drumbeat of judgment. To the guests, he wore his cruelty like a crown, daring them to look away. Inside, however, a flicker of something unfamiliar gnawed at him. Annoyance? Discomfort? Regret? He shoved the thought aside. When he reached her, Adrian crouched. Her chest did not rise. Her lashes rested against skin pale as porcelain. He reached out without thinking, his hand brushing against her fingers. Cold, limp, lifeless. For the first time in years, Adrian's throat tightened. A ghost of unease slithered into his chest, coiling tight. He had broken many things in his life: horses, rivals, reputations. But this felt different. "Get her out of sight," he barked, his voice sharper than ever. "Now!" Two servants rushed forward, carefully lifting Selene's fragile body. Her head lolled to the side, her braid unraveling, strands of dark hair trailing like spilled ink. The sight made Adrian's jaw clench. "Dispose of her if she's gone," he added coldly, though the words burned his tongue. The guests exchanged horrified glances, some quickly excusing themselves, muttering about the Veylor family's cruelty. Adrian ignored them, but as the servants carried Selene away, his gaze followed her. He told himself it was only to ensure his property wasn't wasted. Yet deep inside, the image of her limp hand haunted him. Hours later, in the dimly lit servant quarters, Selene lay motionless on a cot. The household staff gathered in hushed tones, some praying, some fearful of what would happen if she didn't wake. Adrian appeared in the doorway like a shadow. The servants scattered, leaving him alone with her. He stood rigid, watching her shallow, barely there breaths. He wanted to sneer, to call her weak, useless. Instead, his eyes caught on her hand again. Pale, trembling faintly as though clinging to the last thread of life. His chest tightened in a way he despised. "Stupid girl," he muttered, voice low. "Why do you haunt me even now?" The silence pressed in. Then, a sudden, sharp sound. Selene's body jerked, her chest rising with a ragged gasp. Her eyes flew open, wide and glazed with pain. For one heartbeat, the world stood still. And then, her gaze locked on him. Adrian froze, breath caught in his throat. There was no fear in her eyes, only fire. Selene's faint whisper escapes her lips as she stares into Adrian's stunned face. "You will regret this." The storm had passed, but its shadow lingered within the Veylor estate. Selene, once timid and quiet, now carried an air the servants struggled to name. She moved with the same diligence, scrubbing floors and carrying trays, but something in her silence unsettled them. She did not flinch at Adrian's passing footsteps anymore. She did not lower her gaze as quickly. The whispers began. "She's not the same since the fall." Some say she cheated death. Others say she was never just a maid. Adrian pretended not to hear the gossip as he strode through the corridors, but his sharp eyes never missed the shift. Selene's posture had changed. Her gaze lingered too long when it met his. There was no gratitude in her survival, only defiance. That defiance burned him more than her collapse ever had. One evening, as dusk bathed the mansion in bruised light, a footman crept through the servant's wing with a sealed envelope. He slipped it beneath Selene's chamber door, his nervous glances betraying fear of discovery. Selene picked it up with trembling fingers. Her eyes widened at the unfamiliar handwriting. A letter, addressed not to a maid, but to her. She pressed it to her chest, heart racing. But before she could break the seal, footsteps thundered down the hall. She shoved the letter into her apron. The next morning, another envelope arrived, and then another. By the fourth, the servants no longer bothered to hide their curiosity. They whispered in kitchens and gardens alike. Who was writing to the maid? What business could Selene have with strangers? Adrian noticed, He always noticed. That evening, he stormed into the kitchen just as Selene reached for the latest letter. His hand shot out, faster than hers, snatching it from the table. She gasped, eyes wide, not with fear, but with something darker. Adrian turned the envelope over, smirking at her attempt to stand tall. So, my servant receives secret admirers now? But when his eyes landed on the wax seal, the smirk vanished. It was not a lover's crest. It was his, the Veylor crest, his family's mark. For a moment, Adrian's composure cracked. Why would his family's seal be on a letter addressed to a maid? Why would Selene hide it from him? He tore it open, ignoring her desperate protest. His eyes scanned the words, his jaw tightening with each line. And then, his gaze snapped to Selene, sharp as a blade. "You," he whispered, voice cold and low. "What are you hiding from me?" Adrian crumples the letter in his fist, but his hand trembles. The secret inside has the power to destroy them both. Adrian's study was thick with smoke, the curtains drawn, shadows clinging to the walls. The letter lay open across his desk, its words etched into his mind like a scar. To the maid, Selene. Never forget that your parents' sacrifice spared the life of Lord Veylor himself. The debt of blood binds his heirs to protect you, though they may deny it. Adrian's jaw clenched, his breath shallow. The room seemed smaller with every line he reread. His father's life, bought by the lives of a servant's parents. His family bound by honor to the daughter of debtors. The humiliation burned hotter than any fire. He crumpled the parchment in his fist. A maid, beneath him, beneath his name. And yet her very existence tied to his family's survival. It was intolerable. The door creaked. Selene had paused outside, carrying linens past the study. She heard his voice, sharp and venomous, as he muttered to himself. "She will not stay here, not another day. I'll see her dismissed before this filth poisons the household." Selene froze, heart pounding. The faint crackle of paper reached her ears, the scent of smoke seeping under the door. Her hands trembled on the folded sheets she carried. Inside, Adrian struck a match. He watched the flame devour the letter, the words curling into ash. He leaned back in his chair, expression hard, eyes reflecting the blaze. "No one will ever know," he whispered. "Not her, not anyone." The ashes drifted down into the tray, gray embers glowing like dying stars, but when he turned, his blood ran cold. Selene stood in the doorway, silent, pale, her wide eyes locked on the rising smoke. For a heartbeat, the mansion itself seemed to hold its breath. She saw. She knew. Adrian's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. His mask of cruelty slid back into place, though inside his chest a storm raged. "Eavesdropping now, are we?" he said smoothly, but his voice betrayed a tremor. Selene's lips parted, but no sound came. Her gaze dropped to the ashes, then rose to his face. And for the first time since her fall, she let him see it. The quiet fire in her eyes, a strength that unsettled him more than her fragility ever had. Adrian's throat tightened. If she spoke of what she saw, everything could unravel. Selene steps into the room, her voice steady despite her trembling frame. "What was in that letter, Master Adrian?" The silence after Selene's question was heavier than stone. Adrian's study seemed to shrink, the smoke from the burned letter curling like accusing fingers around his throat. Her voice had not trembled. That unsettled him most. "What was in that letter, Master Adrian?" His answer came as a whip of words. "You dare question me?" His chair scraped violently as he rose, towering over her. Selene's hands curled into fists at her sides, but she did not step back. That defiance cut deeper than her obedience ever had. Within moments, punishment followed. He ordered her dragged into the courtyard where the servants gathered, forced to kneel for hours on the stone in bitter cold, her hands clasped behind her back. The whispers of the staff swirled like vultures circling prey, yet her gaze never lowered. Adrian watched from the balcony above, fury masking the strange unease twisting in his chest. Why didn't she break? Why did her silence sting more than her tears? Night fell. The household retreated to their quarters, yet Adrian lingered, his eyes tracing her still form on the stones below. When Selene finally staggered to her feet, her knees bloodied and raw, she did not look up at him. But she walked past with the quiet dignity of someone who refused to bow. For the first time, Adrian felt a flicker of something he could not name. Days later, the estate gates opened to the arrival of a guest, Lord Darius Halvern, Adrian's childhood friend. A man of noble bearing, sharp eyes, and a smile edged with curiosity. "Still the same cold halls," Darius said as Adrian greeted him. His gaze swept the mansion before landing, briefly, on Selene as she hurried past with a tray. His brow furrowed. "And still the same cruelty?" Adrian stiffened. "Discipline," he corrected coldly. Darius tilted his head, a knowing smirk tugging at his lips. "Strange. Discipline, I remember, was for soldiers. What you do looks more personal." The words lingered like a thorn under Adrian's skin. That night, sleep did not come easily. When it did, it brought shadows. In the dream, Selene knelt in chains, her wrists bruised, her face streaked with tears. Her eyes, those unyielding eyes, fixed on him with sorrow deeper than words. "You will destroy me," she whispered in the dream, "and it will destroy you." Adrian jolted awake, breath ragged, his body trembling with a fear he refused to name. Sweat clung to his skin, his hand gripping the bed's carved post so tightly his knuckles blanched. It was only a dream, only a servant, and yet, her voice still echoed in his skull. Adrian looks toward the window, where Selene moves silently across the courtyard in the moonlight. The same figure from his dream. The days that followed Adrian's dream were restless. He threw himself into routine with brutal precision. Harsher orders, heavier punishments, a relentless need to reassert control. Yet no matter how he lashed out, Selene did not break. Her silence was not submission, it was resistance, and resistance had a way of spreading. One evening, while carrying laundry through the West Wing, Selene slipped into an unused corridor. A loose panel behind a shelf had caught her eye days ago. Tonight, she dared to pry it open. Inside, dust-coated boxes revealed ledgers, contracts, deeds, documents bearing the Veylor seal. Her trembling fingers flipped through page after page until her breath caught. Her family's name, her father's lands, her mother's inheritance, sold, seized, erased. The Veylor fortune glittered atop her family's ashes. Her pulse thundered as the truth unfurled before her. They had not merely been poor servants, they had been robbed, ruined, crushed beneath Adrian's father's ambition. And now, Adrian carried that cruelty like a torch. Later, when Adrian entered the kitchens, Selene stood waiting. Her hands shook, not with fear, but with rage barely contained. "You built your wealth on their graves," she whispered. Adrian froze, his eyes narrowing. "Careful. My parents, my life, stolen by your name, and you call it discipline." Her voice rose, enough for a few servants nearby to stiffen. Adrian's hand shot out, fingers clamping around her chin, tilting her face up to his. His eyes burned with something between fury and panic. "Say another word, and you won't live to regret it." The room fell silent. Selene stared back at him, her lips pressed tight, her tears unshed. When he released her, she stumbled back, but did not bow. That night, Selene's resolve hardened. If the truth lived in his father's study, then she would find it, and she would not stop until the whole mansion knew. Midnight came. The corridors slept under silver moonlight, shadows stretching long and dark. Selene crept barefoot down the grand hall, her breath shallow, every creak of the floor a thunderclap in her ears. She slipped into the study, candle trembling in her hand, and began to sift through the drawers. The sound of a hinge groaning behind her froze her blood. She turned, and there he was. Adrian. Standing in the doorway, the candlelight painting his face in sharp lines, eyes like steel. He stepped inside, shutting the door behind him, his voice low, dangerous, and shaking with fury. "Looking for ghosts in my father's house, Selene?" The confrontation in his father's study had left the mansion crackling with unspoken tension. Adrian had not punished Selene, not openly. But his silence was worse than any lash. It was a storm gathering, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came with the announcement of the Veylor's grand masquerade ball. Nobles from across the region flocked to the mansion, draped in jewels and silks, their masks glimmering in candlelight. The halls swelled with laughter, music, and whispered bargains. Adrian, flawless in black velvet, wore his cruelty like armor. When his gaze swept over Selene in her plain servant's dress, he saw her defiance still burning. And he decided tonight he would crush it. "Serve them," he commanded before the crowd, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Let every noble see how low the debt-born have fallen." Selene bowed stiffly, her hands trembling only when she carried trays through the sea of glittering masks. She felt their eyes, curious, mocking, some pitying, as though she were part of the entertainment. Adrian watched from the balcony, his lips curling as she stumbled under the weight of humiliation. But then, as she passed a cluster of nobles, one older gentleman stilled. His jeweled mask slipped slightly as his eyes fixed on her face. "Is it possible?" he murmured, stepping forward. "Alara? No. Your eyes. Yes. You are her daughter." The words struck like thunder. Selene froze, nearly dropping the tray. The name, her mother's name, rang through the hall. Servants gasped. Nobles whispered behind fans. Adrian's blood turned to ice. Before she could speak, his hand seized her arm, fingers digging painfully into her skin. With a smile sharp as glass for the crowd, he excused them both, but his grip betrayed him, trembling, rigid with barely contained rage. He dragged her through the glittering halls, past gardens strung with lanterns, until they were alone under the pale glow of the moon. The music and laughter bled into the distance. In the quiet, he shoved her back against the ivy-wrapped wall, his breath ragged. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice was low, venomous, but his hands, they shook against her shoulders. His fury was not just anger, it was fear. Selene's chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes blazing in the dim light. For once, she saw it clearly, the cracks in the cruel mask of Adrian Veylor. He tightened his grip, whispering with desperate fury, "Who else knows who you are?" The name still echoed in Adrian's mind. Alara's daughter. The words had struck a chord so deep he couldn't silence it. That night, after the ball, he made his choice. Selene was dragged down into the damp cellar, her wrists bound, her dignity stripped once again. Adrian's cold eyes lingered on her through the bars of the iron gate. "You think you've found power in your secrets," he said, voice low and venomous. "But here, you will learn who holds your fate." He left her there, not with blows, but with silence and stone walls. Days passed in the half-dark, broken only by scraps of food shoved through the bars. Selene's strength waned, but her spirit did not. Every time she looked up, she whispered to herself, "I will not break for him." But Adrian's nights were not his own. Sleep offered no peace. In his dreams, he saw Selene's pale body sprawled across marble floors, blood pooling beneath her. He heard her broken breaths, the last whisper of her voice cursing his name. Each time he woke, sweat drenched his skin. Each time he tried to dismiss it, but the images only grew sharper, louder, unbearable. By the third night, he staggered to the cellar door in torment, hand trembling on the latch. He whispered through the iron, almost against his will. "Why do you haunt me, even in my sleep?" No answer. Only her steady gaze, hollow but unbroken. Adrian's jaw tightened. "I will break you before you break me." And yet his voice cracked. He slammed the door shut and locked it again. But just as the echo of his footsteps faded into silence, another sound rose in the dark. A faint scrape, a key sliding into the lock. Selene stiffened. The door creaked open slowly, light spilling into the shadows. It was not Adrian. A cloaked figure stepped forward, face hidden in the dim lantern light. Their voice was urgent, low, filled with familiarity Selene couldn't place. "Come quickly, you don't belong here." Selene's chains fall loose, and the stranger whispers, "Your mother's bloodline is in danger." The lantern's glow revealed the nobleman from the masquerade, the one who had called her by her mother's name. His eyes softened at the sight of Selene's frail form. "You are not just a maid," he whispered urgently, unlocking her chains. "You are Ilara's daughter, the rightful heir to the lands Veylor stole when your family fell. Adrian's father swore your bloodline would vanish. Yet here you stand." Selene's breath caught. Her world tilted. For years, she had believed she was nothing more than a servant trapped by her parents' debt. Now, this stranger claimed her blood carried a legacy powerful enough to rival the Veylors. "Why tell me this?" she whispered. "Because you deserve to live free. Because your mother gave her life to protect mine. And because Adrian will destroy you if you stay." His grip tightened on her wrist, eyes burning with urgency. "Escape with me tonight, before it's too late." Selene hesitated, torn between terror and the faint spark of hope she thought had died long ago. Her gaze lingered on the cellar door. Could she really leave? Could she truly abandon everything she had endured? Before she could answer, the air shifted. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hall, sharp, unrelenting. The cellar door slammed open. Adrian stood there, his expression twisted, a storm of fury and betrayal. His eyes locked first on Selene, then on the stranger standing far too close to her. "What is this?" Adrian's voice was deadly calm, but his fists trembled at his sides. "My prisoner. Conspiring with thieves?" The noble stepped forward protectively, shielding Selene. "Your reign of cruelty ends tonight, Adrian." Adrian's jaw clenched, rage flickering like wildfire across his face. Adrian seizes a blade from the wall, pointing it at the stranger, and growls, "Then one of us will not leave this cellar alive." Adrian lunged like a beast unleashed, his hands tightening around the noble's throat. The stranger gasped for air, his face reddening as Adrian's fury consumed him. "No!" Selene cried, hurling herself between them. She clutched Adrian's arm, her voice breaking. "If you kill him, you prove every cruel word spoken about you. Stop!" Her trembling form shielded the noble, her fragile frame pressed against Adrian's wrath. For a heartbeat, his rage faltered. The sight of her, bruised, defiant, and willing to stand between death and mercy, cracked something deep within him. His grip loosened. But before the silence could settle, shouts erupted from the halls above. The sharp scent of smoke filled the cellar air. Flames licked down the staircase as chaos thundered across the mansion. Servants screamed, chandeliers crashed, and the eastern wing blazed with fire. "The fire!" a servant's voice cried, muffled in the smoke. Adrian's face twisted in confusion and rage. He had given no order for this. Who would dare? Selene darted toward the smoke, coughing violently. She could hear a child's cries from the upper floors, one of the kitchen maid's little brothers, trapped. Without hesitation, she rushed in, vanishing into the suffocating heat. "Selene!" Adrian roared, his voice ragged, but the smoke swallowed her. For the first time, fear stabbed through him sharper than any blade. Through the roaring flames, Adrian sees Selene's figure collapse, her body surrounded by fire. The fire roared like a beast devouring the mansion. Adrian plunged through the smoke, his fine coat catching embers as he shoved fallen beams aside. His lungs burned, his skin blistered, but he didn't stop. "Selene!" he bellowed, his voice breaking with a panic he'd never known. Through the haze, he saw her collapsed against the flames, her dress singed, her body trembling in the smoke. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arms around her, shielding her with his own body as he forced a path through fire and falling timber. His hands seared against hot iron, his arms scarred, but still he carried her. They collapsed onto the wet grass outside. Selene coughed violently, her chest heaving. Adrian hovered above her, his hands trembling, not with anger, but with terror. For a fleeting second, she saw it in his eyes, raw fear, desperate and human. But when the servants rushed over, Adrian rose, coldness snapping back into place. "Get her back to work," he ordered hoarsely, hiding his burned hands behind his back. By daylight, his cruelty doubled, punishments harsher, his commands sharper, as though burying the weakness she had witnessed. Yet Selene could not forget the look in his eyes as he carried her from the fire. And when she tended his wounds in secret, she found herself torn, between hatred for his cruelty and confusion at his silent act of salvation. That night, as she cleaned his chambers, she noticed a drawer slightly ajar. Inside, wrapped in velvet, lay a leather-bound journal. Against her better judgment, she opened it. Her breath caught. Page after page was filled with a single name, written over and over in Adrian's strong, slanted script. Selene. Selene stares at the obsessive writings, realizing Adrian's cruelty may be hiding something far darker or deeper. The room was thick with silence, the journal like a blade between them. Selene braced herself for his wrath, the shouting, the cruelty, the punishment. But instead, Adrian staggered, his shoulders shook. He crossed the room, not with fury, but with a hollow, broken laugh. He slammed his fist into the mirror above the fireplace, shards scattering like fallen stars. His reflection splintered into 100 pieces, each one mocking him. "I am everything I swore I wouldn't become," he muttered, blood dripping from his knuckles. His eyes, usually so sharp and merciless, were raw with torment. "Do you know what it's like, Selene? To wake every day with their whispers in your head. My father's debts, my mother's scorn, their voices telling me I am weak, unworthy." Nothing? Selene's heart wavered. This was not the cruel master who had scarred her, but a man unraveling beneath the weight of chains no one else could see. For the first time, pity warred with hatred. Could there truly be something left in him worth saving? But before she could answer, a violent knock echoed through the halls. The doors of the Veylor mansion burst open. Soldiers in black and gold armor stormed in, their blades drawn. At their head was the noble from the masquerade, his eyes fixed on Selene. "By the king's order," he declared, "the girl is under royal protection. Release her at once." Adrian's body went rigid, stepping in front of her like a wolf cornered. The noble leveled his sword. "Step aside, Adrian Veylor, or fall with your sins." The room was thick with silence, the journal like a blade between them. Selene braced herself for his wrath, the shouting, the cruelty, the punishment. But instead, Adrian staggered, his shoulders shook. He crossed the room, not with fury, but with a hollow, broken laugh. He slammed his fist into the mirror above the fireplace, shards scattering like fallen stars. His reflection splintered into 100 pieces, each one mocking him. "I am everything I swore I wouldn't become," he muttered, blood dripping from his knuckles. His eyes, usually so sharp and merciless, were raw with torment. "Do you know what it's like, Selene? To wake every day with their whispers in your head. My father's debts, my mother's scorn, their voices telling me I am weak, unworthy. Nothing? Selene's heart wavered. This was not the cruel master who had scarred her, but a man unraveling beneath the weight of chains no one else could see. For the first time, pity warred with hatred. Could there truly be something left in him worth saving? But before she could answer, a violent knock echoed through the halls. The doors of the Veylor mansion burst open. Soldiers in black and gold armor stormed in, their blades drawn. At their head was the noble from the masquerade, his eyes fixed on Selene. "By the king's order," he declared, "the girl is under royal protection. Release her at once." Adrian's body went rigid, stepping in front of her like a wolf cornered. The noble leveled his sword. "Step aside, Adrian Veylor, or fall with your sins." The great hall pulsed with tension, torchlight flickering against steel. The noble's words hung heavy, his soldiers' boots echoing across the marble floor. Adrian's jaw clenched, his burned hands tightening into fists. He stepped forward, his voice low, venomous. "She is mine. Her blood, her life, her every breath. They belong here to me." Selene froze, fury boiling through her veins. For years she had endured his cruelty in silence, but something inside her snapped. She stepped from behind him, her eyes blazing with defiance. "No," she whispered, trembling but resolute. Then, with all the strength of her scarred hands, she struck him across the face. The sound cracked through the hall like thunder. Adrian staggered back, his cheek reddened, his eyes wide, not from pain, but from the sheer disbelief that she had dared. "You will never own me," Selene hissed, her voice trembling with both rage and liberation. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the soldiers surged forward, the clash of steel and boots shattering the moment. Adrian's hand flew to his side, pulling free a hidden blade, its edge gleaming in the torchlight. His fury returned, twisted now with desperation, his body coiled like a predator ready to spill blood. As the guards storm the hall, Adrian raises his blade, but no one can tell if it is to defend Selene, or to keep her as his prisoner forever. The mansion erupted into chaos. Steel clashed against steel, the thunder of boots shaking the marble floors. Adrian moved like a predator unleashed, his blade cutting through the first guard with a vicious strike. Blood sprayed across the grand hall, staining the white marble crimson. Another lunged, but Adrian's rage was merciless. He drove his sword deep, twisting until the man fell lifeless at his feet. His breath came ragged, his shirt torn, blood trickling from a gash across his side. "Enough!" Selene screamed, her voice raw. She darted between them, her hands trembling as she tried to stop the carnage. "Adrian, stop this before more lives are lost." But Adrian's eyes were wild, his chest heaving. "They want to take you from me," he snarled. "I'll kill every last one of them before I let that happen." The noble raised his sword, fury burning in his gaze. Soldiers surged forward again. In the chaos, Selene threw herself in front of Adrian, desperate to end the bloodshed. "Please," she cried. But the plea was cut short. A blade slashed across her side, crimson blooming across her dress. Her body jolted as the steel struck, her gasp sharp and broken. Adrian's scream tore through the hall, raw and guttural. Selene collapsed into Adrian's arms, blood soaking the marble floor beneath them. The hall was drenched in silence, broken only by Selene's ragged breaths. Her blood pooled across the marble, staining Adrian's hands as he cradled her trembling body. "Selene, no, no, don't you dare leave me." Adrian's voice cracked, raw with terror. His eyes, once so cold and merciless, now brimmed with desperation. He pressed his burned palms against her wound, heedless of the pain, trying to hold her life inside her. Her lips trembled, a faint smile ghosting her pale face. "Why, do you sound afraid, Master Adrian?" she whispered weakly. "You've never feared anything." Because it's you, he snapped, his voice breaking. It's always been you. Damn it. Stay awake. Don't you close your eyes. Her hand, shaking, reached up and brushed his cheek. Her eyes glistened with tears as she whispered, I forgive you, even if you never asked for it. His chest tightened as though the words were knives. He gathered her into his arms, stumbling past the fallen soldiers, past the flames still crackling through the east wing. His only thought, save her. He burst into the courtyard where panicked servants scattered, shouting for help. His voice roared through the night. Fetch the doctor! Now! Minutes later, in a candlelit chamber, Selene lay pale upon the bed, her blood soaking the sheets. Adrian gripped the physician by the collar, his eyes wild, his voice hoarse. Save her, he begged. I don't care what it costs. My fortune, my life, everything. Just save her. The doctor looks grim, shaking his head slowly as Selene's breathing weakens. The doctor worked through the night, bloodied cloths piling at his feet. Servants hovered in terrified silence as Adrian stood over them, his burned hands clenched, his eyes never leaving Selene's pale form. At dawn, the physician staggered back, exhausted. She will live, he rasped, but she is fragile. The wound cut deep. If she suffers another shock, another blow, she may not survive. Relief broke across Adrian's face, so fierce it seemed to shatter him. He sank into the chair by her bedside, his body trembling as he took her cold hand in his scarred grip. For hours he didn't move, watching her chest rise and fall, terrified of each shallow breath. When Selene finally stirred, her lashes fluttering, she saw not the cruel master, but a man hollowed out by fear. You stayed, she whispered. I will always stay, Adrian answered, his voice low, hoarse. But that vow twisted into obsession. In the days that followed, Adrian unleashed his fury on the household. Any servant who so much as looked at Selene harshly felt the lash of his rage. Guards trembled, the staff fled, and whispers spread of a master who had gone mad for his maid. Selene's strength waned, her world reduced to the confines of her room. But one night, as she lay half awake, she heard his voice drifting from the study below, sharp with fury and desperation. I will not lose her, Adrian growled. I don't care what it takes. I would burn this wretched world to ashes before I let it steal her from me. Selene's blood ran cold. Selene clutched the sheets, horrified, realizing the man who now swore to protect her might destroy everything in the name of that vow. The mansion had grown silent, its halls stripped of servants too terrified to remain. Only shadows lingered now, shadows, and Adrian, pacing endlessly outside Selene's chamber like a caged beast. One evening, he entered quietly, his hands trembling as though he held something far heavier than any blade. Selene, weak and pale, looked up from her bed. I can't hide it anymore, Adrian whispered. His voice was stripped of its usual venom, his mask gone. He fell to his knees beside her, his burned hands clutching hers. Selene, I love you. I have always loved you. In hatred, in cruelty, in every twisted way I failed to show it. You are the only thing that keeps me breathing. Tears burned in her eyes, but not from joy. She shook her head, her voice breaking. Adrian, your love is poison. It destroys everything it touches. You think you're saving me, but all you've done is break me. The words struck him like steel through the heart. His chest heaved as though the air had been torn from him. He collapsed against the bedside, his forehead pressed to her sheets, his body trembling with silent sobs. For the first time in his life, Adrian Veylor looked utterly powerless. Selene turned away, closing her eyes, too weak to bear the sight. But before the silence could deepen, the great doors of the mansion thundered open once more. The noble returned, this time flanked by soldiers bearing sealed documents. His voice rang cold through the hall. Adrian Veylor, your father's sins cannot be buried. The truth is known. He murdered Selene's parents to seize their lands. Selene gasped, her heart lurching. Adrian's bloodied knuckles tightened around the bed frame as the words pierced the air. Selene stared at Adrian in horror as the noble placed the evidence in her hands, proof of the Veylor's darkest crime. The documents spread like wildfire through the kingdom. By dawn, every noble house whispered of the Veylor's disgrace. The empire Adrian's father built on stolen blood began to rot overnight. Merchants withdrew, allies vanished, and the once proud family name became a curse. Selene sat in the ruined Great Hall, the proof of her parents' murder clutched in her frail hands. The noble urged her forward, his voice sharp with justice. Take what was stolen, end this bloodline's tyranny, end him. Adrian stood before her, stripped of his pride, his blade cast aside. His once imposing frame seemed smaller now, shadows hollowing his face. His eyes burned with exhaustion and something dangerously close to peace. If this is justice, he said quietly, kneeling before her, then let it be by your hand. I have taken everything from you. Take my life, and let it end. The hall fell silent, the soldiers watching, breath held. Selene's hand trembled as she raised the dagger the noble pressed into her palm. For years, she had dreamed of this moment, the end of her torment, the vengeance her parents deserved. Her eyes met Adrian's. For the first time, there was no cruelty in him, only surrender. The blade slipped from her hand, clattering to the marble floor. Tears streaked down her face as she whispered, "Killing you won't bring them back." But before relief could set in, Selene gasped, clutching her chest. A sharp, wet cough escaped her lips, blood staining her hand. Her body convulsed as weakness overtook her, her wound reopening with a vengeance. Adrian caught her as she collapsed, screaming her name as crimson spilled from her mouth. Selene's fragile body shuddered in Adrian's arms, her breath growing shallow. He pressed his burning palms against her wound, as though sheer will could keep her tethered to life. "Stay with me," he begged, voice breaking, his tears falling onto her pale skin. "Please, I'll change. I'll give you the world. Just don't leave me." Her dim eyes softened as she lifted a trembling hand to his cheek. For a fleeting moment, she was the one comforting him. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice a ghost of sound. "I forgive you." A single tear slid down her face, dropping onto his cheek like the last trace of her soul. And then, her hand fell limp. The silence that followed tore through Adrian's chest more cruelly than any blade. He rocked her lifeless body, a guttural scream ripping from his throat, echoing through the shattered halls of the once proud Veylor mansion. Servants wept from the shadows, but none dared approach. Days later, the estate stood in eerie quiet. At Selene's grave, beneath a lone, withered tree, Adrian knelt, his face hollow, his heart a ruin. "This world took you because of me," he murmured, pressing his lips to the cold stone. "So I'll bury it with me." That night, flames devoured the mansion. The great walls crackled and collapsed as fire consumed everything the Veylors had built on blood and cruelty. At the heart of the inferno, Adrian walked steadily into the blaze, Selene's ribbon clenched in his hand. No cries, no escape. Only fire. Only ruin. The mansion crumbled into ashes, leaving nothing but whispers carried on the wind, of a cruel master who loved too late, and the maid whose spirit broke his chains.